Chapter 15: The Mundell-Fleming Model and Exchange Rate Regime. Let's begin with the key assumption of the Mundell-Fleming model. We assume a small open economy with perfect capital mobility. This means the domestic interest rate R is equal to the world interest rate R star. Now let's look at the IS star curve, which represents equilibrium in the goods market. The equation is Y equals consumption, a function of Y, minus T, plus investment, a function of R star, plus G plus NX, a function of E, where Y is output or income, T is taxes, R star is world interest rate, and it is fixed, G is government spending, E is nominal exchange rate, it is the foreign currency per unit of domestic currency, and NX, a function of E, is net exports, which depend on the nominal exchange rate. The IS star curve is drawn for a fixed value of R star, and the only variable affecting it here is the nominal exchange rate E. Now think about what happens when the domestic currency depreciates. A lower exchange rate makes domestic goods cheaper for foreigners. This boosts exports, increases net exports, and raises output Y. So when E depreciates, we move down along the IS star curve. The graph shows this inverse relationship between E and Y along the IS star curve. Now let's look at the LM star curve, which represents money market equilibrium in a small open economy. The equation is M over P equals liquidity, a function of R star, and Y. The LM star curve is drawn for a given value of R star. That means the interest rate is fixed, and the LM star curve becomes a vertical line. Why is the LM star curve vertical? Because in its model, the nominal exchange rate E does not affect the money market. Only output Y and real money balances M over P matter for determining equilibrium in the money market. Equilibrium in the Mundell-Fleming model. In the Mundell-Fleming model, for a small open economy, equilibrium occurs when both the goods market and the money market are in balance. The equilibrium conditions are given by Y equals consumption, a function of Y minus T, plus investment, a function of R star, plus G plus NX, a function of E. That is goods market equilibrium. And M over P equals liquidity, a function of R star, and Y. That is money market equilibrium. On the graph, the intersection of the IS star and LM star curves determines the equilibrium exchange rate E and output Y. This intersection point satisfies both equations above. That means we found the values of output and exchange rate that work for both the goods and money markets simultaneously. Floating and fixed exchange rates. In a system of floating exchange rate, the nominal exchange rate E is allowed to fluctuate based on economic conditions. For example, if output increases, net exports might adjust, and the nominal exchange rate will change to reflect that. In a system of fixed exchange rate, the central bank commits to exchanging domestic currency for foreign currency at a fixed rate. This means the central bank must actively intervene in the foreign exchange market to maintain that rate. We'll explore how these regimes respond differently to fiscal and monetary policy shocks in upcoming slides. In this section, let's talk about how fiscal policy works in a small open economy under floating exchange rates. Suppose the government increases spending, this shifts the IS star curve to the right. In a small open economy, this would lead to higher output Y and a higher interest rate R. The higher R would reduce consumption and investment, a phenomenon known as crowding out. In a small open economy with perfect capital mobility, things are different. The interest rate R is fixed at the world level, R star, so it cannot rise. Instead, the increase in G raises income Y, which increases the demand for money. But with R fixed, the exchange rate E must appreciate to restore equilibrium. And appreciated currency makes exports more expensive, so net exports fall. The fall in net exports crowds out the rise in Qi, so overall output Y remains unchanged. This is an example of crowding out through exchange rates in an open economy. Let's explore how expansionary monetary policy works in a small open economy under a floating exchange rate regime. When the central bank increases the money supply, the LM star curve shifts to the right. Let's compare with a closed economy. An increase in the money supply M lowers the interest rate R, which increases both consumption and investment, leading to higher output Y. In a small open economy, an increase in the money supply M causes the exchange rate E to fall or depreciate, which increases net exports and therefore raises output Y. Important note, expansionary monetary policy in a small open economy does not raise world aggregate demand. It simply shifts demand from foreign products to domestic products. Therefore, increases in income and employment at home come at the expense of losses abroad. Let's analyze what happens when a country imposes trade restrictions like tariffs or quotas in a small open economy with floating exchange rates. First, the trade restriction reduces imports. That initially shifts the net exports curve outward. This makes the IS star curve shift to the right. As a result, the exchange rate E appreciates. Then net exports fall due to the stronger domestic currency, and output Y remains unchanged. Note that import restrictions cannot reduce a trade deficit. Even though NX is unchanged, the total volume of trade declines. The trade restriction reduces imports. The exchange rate appreciation reduces exports. Less trade means fewer gains from trade. Import restrictions may protect jobs in industries producing the restricted goods, but destroy jobs in export-producing sectors. This creates sectoral shifts in employment, which can lead to frictional unemployment rather than increasing total employment. So while trade policy can affect the composition of trade, it does not raise national income or reduce the trade deficit. In this section, we are going to discuss the small open economy under fixed exchange rates. Under a fixed exchange rate regime, the central bank commits to exchanging domestic currency for foreign currency at a predetermined rate. In the context of the Mundell-Fleming model, this means the central bank adjusts the money supply as needed to keep the exchange rate fixed. That is, the central bank moves the LM star curve to maintain the fixed exchange rate. This policy regime stabilizes the nominal exchange rate. However, over the long run, when prices become flexible, the real exchange rate can still vary, even if the nominal exchange rate remains unchanged. So while the nominal exchange rate is pegged, inflation or deflation can cause movements in the real exchange rate. Let's analyze how fiscal policy works when a country operates under a fixed exchange rate regime. Suppose the government increases spending, then the IS star curve shifts to the right. Under floating exchange rates, this would appreciate the currency and crowd out net exports, leaving output unchanged. But under fixed exchange rates, the central bank intervenes to prevent appreciation. It does this by selling domestic currency, which increases the money supply. This monetary expansion shifts the LM star curve to the right, reinforcing the initial fiscal expansion. As a result, output Y increases further. Therefore, under fixed exchange rates, fiscal policy is very effective at boosting output. Reminder, in a closed economy, fiscal policy can also raise output. But here, in a small open economy with a fixed exchange rate, the mechanism is enhanced by monetary policy support. Let's now examine what happens when a country under a fixed exchange rate tries to use monetary policy. Suppose the central bank increases the money supply. The LM-star curve shifts to the right. This puts downward pressure on the exchange rate, causing depreciation. However, to maintain the fixed exchange rate, the central bank must buy domestic currency using foreign reserves. This intervention reduces the money supply, shifting the LM-star curve backward. As a result, output Y and the exchange rate E remain unchanged. Therefore, monetary policy is ineffective under fixed exchange rates because the central bank must offset any change in money supply to maintain the peg. In contrast, under floating exchange rates or in a closed economy, monetary policy is effective in changing output. Let's analyze how trade policy works when a country has a fixed exchange rate regime. Suppose the government imposes import restrictions such as tariffs or quotas. This raises net exports, shifting the IS-star curve to the right. With a fixed exchange rate, the central bank must intervene to prevent E from rising or appreciation. It does this by selling domestic currency, which increases the money supply. The increase in money supply shifts the LM-star curve to the right as well. As a result, output Y rises further. Comparison: under floating exchange rates, import restrictions do not affect Y or NX. Under fixed exchange rates, import restrictions do increase Y and NX. Caution: these gains come at a cost. The increase in domestic demand comes from shifting consumption away from foreign goods. Other countries may lose as a result. Let's summarize how different policies affect the economy based on whether the exchange rate is floating or fixed. Policy 1. Fiscal expansion. Under floating exchange rates, output Y, no change. Exchange rate E increases or appreciates. Net exports and NX falls. Under fixed exchange rates, output Y increases. Exchange rate E fixed. Net exports and NX no change. Policy 2. Monetary expansion. Under floating exchange rates, output Y increases. Exchange rate E decreases or depreciates. Net exports and NX increases. Under fixed exchange rates, output Y no change. Exchange rate E fixed. Net exports and NX no change. Policy 3. Import restrictions. Under floating exchange rates, output Y no change. Exchange rate E increases. Net exports and NX no change. Under fixed exchange rates, output Y increases. Exchange rate E fixed. Net exports and NX increases. Conclusion: monetary policy is more effective under floating exchange rates. Fiscal policy is more effective under fixed exchange rates. Import restrictions only boost output under fixed exchange rates, but they may harm trade in the long run. Let's weigh the pros and cons of floating and fixed exchange rates. Arguments for floating exchange rates: allow monetary policy to focus on domestic goals such as stable economic growth and low inflation. Arguments for fixed exchange rates: avoid uncertainty and volatility, which helps with easier international trade and investment. Provide monetary discipline, limits excessive money creation, and helps avoid hyperinflation. Example: Argentina in the 1990s established a currency board to fix exchange rate and defend against speculative attacks. Another extreme case, dollarization, occurs in high inflation countries. Country uses foreign currency like US dollars instead of domestic currency. In this case, domestic government does not control how much money it can print anymore. Let's take the quiz together to reinforce what we have learned about the Mundell-Fleming model. Question number 1. Which of the following increases income under floating exchange rate? The correct answer is A. An increase in the money supply. When M increases, the LM star curve shifts right, E depreciates, and X rises, and Y increases. Question number 2. Which of the following increases income under fixed exchange rate? The correct answer is D. A decrease in taxes. With fixed exchange rates, fiscal policy is powerful. T decreases shifts the I star curve right, and Y increases. Question number 3. If a country restricts imports, what happens to the currency and net exports under floating exchange rate? The correct answer is B. Currency rises and net exports remain unchanged. And X rises shifts the I star curve right, but E appreciates and offsets NX, then shifts the I star curve backward, so NX stays the same. Question number 4. According to the Mundell-Fleming model, in an economy with a flexible or floating exchange rate, expansionary fiscal policy causes the exchange rate to rise or appreciate. Expansionary monetary policy causes the exchange rate to fall or depreciate. The correct answer is B. Rise and fall. Question number 5. How does dollarization affect a country's central bank? Under dollarization, it eliminates the country's ability to run its own monetary policy. The correct answer is B. It loses its ability to conduct an independent monetary policy. After all, this chapter explains how a small open economy operates under different exchange rate regimes using the Mundell-Fleming model. We saw that the choice of exchange rate regime affects which policies are effective. With a floating exchange rate, monetary policy is useful, but fiscal policy is not. With a fixed exchange rate, fiscal policy is effective, but monetary policy loses its impact. Trade restrictions, such as tariffs, do not reduce trade deficits under floating exchange rates and may hurt global trade. Under fixed exchange rates, they can increase output, but this comes at the expense of other countries. Finally, we compare the two exchange rate regimes. Floating exchange rates give more flexibility and allow the use of monetary policy to support goals like growth and low inflation. Fixed exchange rates offer stability but reduce policy freedom.